Yesterday.
Hi everyone, my name is Christina and I'm going to be rebutting against the other Christina that just spoke. So her claim was that football players are not overpaid, and this is kind of confusing because it's kind of a value claim instead of a claim of fact, and it's also double negative. Basically what she's trying to say is that the NFL players are being paid correctly. Her secondary claims were: 1, there's a wide market in sports where advertisers are willing to pay lots of money for athletes to endorse their items. 2, there's excessive training, dieting, and hours to perform, to put in for the football players to perform, and there's high risk of injuries and concussions. And 3, the amount of money the NFL generates each year is around $6 billion, and each football player average salary is around $1.9 million. Okay, so to start off, her first claim, she said that there's a wide market available and that advertisers are willing to pay lots of money. But what does advertisers having to pay them to endorse their products have to do with their actual football playing salaries? It's kind of contradicting her point that football players are not being overpaid, because if advertisers are paying them extra money just to hold up a product or something, isn't that kind of contradicting? And also, her example doesn't really help, because there's many athletes that are being paid to endorse an item, and there have been no sales. For example, according to Yahoo Sports, Michael Vick, the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, lost his sponsorships with Kraft and Coca-Cola after being put in jail. He actually caused them to lose sales instead of gain sales. And her claim was also counterproductive, because even with all this extra money that they're bringing in, NFL players don't really know how to spend it. According to Sports Illustrated, 78% of NFL players are currently bankrupt or very financially stressed. Okay, so her second point was that there's extensive training and injuries being put with this sport. That's true that some players are being paid to play their role, but there's other players that are being overpaid. For example, according to Bleacher Report, a website that writes about sports, the ex-Oakland Raiders running back Mike Goodson, he actually just signed a $6.9 million contract with the New York Jets, but he's actually never started a single game or made any touchdowns. So clearly some players are getting signed to basically sit on the bench, and it's not fair that he's getting paid $6.9 million while there's other people out there that are getting paid nothing. Also, she stated that there was a high rate of injuries with the sport, that there's lots of concussions, but she never stated any evidence about how a salary can compensate for players' injuries while playing football. I think that if she would have said that, it would have been more effective to help her claim. And lastly, her third claim was that the NFL makes around $6 billion, and the football players are making around $1.9 million. The high salaries of these football players are causing franchises in the league to almost collapse. For example, the Detroit Lions, according to Forbes, are valued at $900 million at this moment, and they're 1 out of 5 teams to not cross the $1 billion threshold. So basically, as of right now, this one team is equivalent to about 5 or 6 other players on the football league. For example, according to Overcap, which is the salary website for the NFL, Matt Ryan from the Falcons is making $104 million each year. Joe Flacco is signed for $120 million. Aaron Rodgers from the Packers is signed for $110 million. So if a whole football team is equivalent to a couple of football players, their salary is clearly too high. Another point I would like to make is that she's saying that football players are being paid correctly, but it's kind of hard to say that, because it depends on really how you see it, because it's a value claim. There's firefighters right now, or policemen out there that are risking their lives to save our planet and our world, and football players that are just getting paid to entertain us. According to the LA firefighters website, their firefighters are making about $53,000 to $74,000, whereas football players are making $1.9 million. So it's kind of based on you to see what's more important and if the salary is proportionate. So in conclusion, it's hard to say that a football player is being paid correctly or high or under because, like I said, it's a value claim and it depends on your perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, I know, right?
What did I mess up?
Yeah, they don't make quarterbacks. That's their contract. That's not what they make each year.
I know, I probably said that wrong. I said a year first and then I said got signed 120 million. I said it right before.
I would take $140 million just for my entire life.
Yeah.
I don't even know who the Detroit Lions are. I just know them. I never heard of them.
Don't worry,
Really?
their city's bankrupt, so it's
Oh, no wonder
okay.
they're worth like nothing. Dude.
You know, yeah, like they get a lot of money play.
No, yeah,
It's weird, right?
well, it's just not.
But of course, like they're not.
Like, have you
I actually don't think I'll tonight, but I'm just one of the promoters.
Ford Field, yeah. Ford Field was not
There we go.
There are some comedians that you might laugh
across the
at.
street. There's a few dollars. That's just a lot deeper.
Okay, Christina, I thought that you did a good job identifying the secondary and the primary claims of the advocate and responding to them individually. It was very easy to follow, so there's no problem there. You did a good job analyzing some of the evidence to begin with, the discussion, for instance, of what they make and the whole argument about advertising, that's not related to salary. That's a good challenge on the reasoning that the advocate is using, because that's not base salary, that's something extra that people get, and how it's relevant to the base salary is problematic. I did like the counter example about how, in fact, it could have a contrary impact, because sometimes the players have a negative impact on the products that they're endorsing. Although I don't know that it gets you much in the long run, I think the illustration of a negative example does seem to send some sense that there are balancing issues that are going on here. The counterclaim, I think, that talks about bankruptcy, I think is a good argument, but you need to explain it a little bit more about what the impact means. In other words, I guess the argument would be that it doesn't matter what we pay them one way or the other, they're going to go broke, and so we shouldn't care that they get overpaid because they're going to be broke anyway. I'm not sure that that's the way you want to present this issue. I think it's a relevant point, but I'm not sure that you've explained how we should be using it in evaluating the pay that the players are getting. I did think you had a good challenge on the argument concerning their injuries, like from concussions and those sorts of things. The argument suggesting that being paid well, how does that compensate for those injuries? How does it balance out? Is there some, for every dead brain cell, you got an extra $100,000? I don't know how we measure those sorts of things and whether or not that makes it worthwhile or worthless. And I think you are perfectly correct in pointing out that this is largely a value claim here about whether or not what they're being paid seems fair. And you've got some good comparative examples. You mentioned the firefighters as an illustration. I think that's okay. The idea that, look, we've got 4 or 5 players who are worth the value of an entire team. I think that that's a good argument to make, even whether it's an annual salary or not. You got 5 players who are making as much as a whole team is worth. That seems to suggest that they are, in fact, given more compensation than maybe the teams can afford. Or, for example, that their outsized value is important. I like the example. You had the one example of the player that got paid $6 million and never even played it down. You know, that's a good deal. I could sign up for that. I could meet that requirement. As long as I don't ever have to go out on the field, I could play football. That would be great, you know, and you can just write me a check for that right now. And there's a good argument there that says that kind of stuff happens on a regular basis. I think you could use a little bit more information that talks about all those busts that the NFL invests in. We've got a whole bunch of players that, you know, they get drafted and then they're out of the league in just a couple of years, and they've taken millions of dollars with them, and their contribution to their teams has been negligible or even negative in the long run. And there are plenty of examples of that. What's that?
Jamarcus Russell.
Yeah, there you go. That was, you're talking about the Raiders. And here's a good illustration. All right, so and that happens all the time. Yeah, there are a lot of them. Yeah, so I think a couple more examples and illustrations would make that point a little bit stronger. Good.